Family life isn't always just about happy moments. Sometimes it's the unexpected twists that make everything chaotic. I married the woman I love, but along with her came her younger sister, Alexa, a girl I never really liked. Since childhood, Alexa had always been a spoiled, rebellious troublemaker who constantly gave my wife headaches. I endured her presence only out of love for my wife. But then, one day, Alexa returned home and did something no one could have predicted. She confessed her feelings for me. It was like a bomb exploding, setting off intense reactions from the entire family. I told the truth, but does that make me the worst person in this story? Family life is not always about moments of happiness. Sometimes it's about the unexpected twists that make everything messy. I married the woman I love, but along with her came someone I never truly liked, her younger sister, Alexa. Since childhood, Alexa had been a spoiled, rebellious girl who constantly gave my wife headaches. I endured her presence only because of my love for my wife. But one day, Alexa came back home and did something no one saw coming. She confessed her feelings for me. It was like a bomb exploding, triggering intense reactions from the entire family. I told the truth, but did that make me the worst person in this story? My wife and I got married 2 years ago, but our relationship had lasted much longer. Before we tied the knot, I had already been familiar with her family, especially Alexa, the sister who had always been treated as my wife's second daughter. My in-laws run a business abroad, and because they were busy with work, they sent Alexa to the U.S. at a young age, placing full responsibility for her upbringing on my wife. At the time, my wife was still very young, but she took on a motherly role, worrying about Alexa's meals, sleep, and education. The truth is, Alexa was never an obedient or appreciative child. On the contrary, she was difficult, selfish, and ungrateful for everything my wife did for her. She constantly broke rules, neglected her studies, received poor feedback from teachers, and even refused to do her assignments. My wife tried numerous times to tutor and guide her, only to be met with indifference and defiance. What made it worse was Alexa's arrogance. She acted as if the world revolved around her. I never understood how my wife managed to be so patient with her. I always kept my distance from Alexa. I wasn't close to her, nor did I try to be the ideal brother-in-law. But for my wife's sake, I remained polite. I knew my wife had sacrificed too much to raise Alexa, so I tried to help in small ways. Sometimes taking Alexa out so my wife could have a break. Sometimes speaking up for Alexa to keep my wife from being too disappointed in her. But deep down, I never had any genuine fondness for Alexa. She only made things harder for everyone. Things got slightly better when Alexa went to college. We no longer had to deal with her daily, and I secretly thought this would ease my wife's burden. But then, on Thanksgiving, Alexa returned home unannounced. That was when the unthinkable happened. She confessed her feelings for me. Alexa told me that I had treated her better than my wife ever had, that she had felt this way since she was a child. But to me, everything I did was solely out of love for my wife. I had never had any special intentions toward Alexa, and her confession disgusted me more than I could ever express. I had never once imagined this scenario, nor did I ever think Alexa would develop such feelings for me. Now I am left wondering, was my kindness a mistake? Or was it the way Alexa was raised that led her to such misguided emotions? I had always tried to keep my distance from Alexa, but after she confessed her feelings for me, all boundaries were shattered. I couldn't believe that someone I had always considered a little sister could think that way. A wave of disgust and discomfort washed over me. But what was even worse was that she didn't realize the gravity of the situation. Alexa said that I had always treated her well, that I cared about her more than I did my wife. I wanted to laugh at her words. She didn't understand that my kindness came entirely from my desire to help my wife, not from any special concern for her. But Alexa didn't see it that way. She thought I truly cared for her in a different way. And that made me shudder. I tried to stay calm and made it clear that I had no feelings for her. But Alexa wouldn't stop. She kept bringing up how I had always protected her, always defended her when my wife got upset. She reminded me of the times I took her out, the times I asked my wife to forgive her mistakes. To me, all of that was simply the actions of a brother-in-law trying to help his wife relieve some stress. But to Alexa, it was a sign of something more. I felt incredibly uncomfortable. I didn't want to hurt Alexa, but I also couldn't let her continue with this delusion. And that's when I lost my patience. I told her outright that I had never liked her. I said I only put up with her for my wife's sake. Every bit of kindness I had shown her was never about her. It was about my wife. I told her that she had always made my wife's life miserable, and I hated that. I told her that every time she inserted herself between us, all I felt was irritation. I saw Alexa's expression change instantly. She froze, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Then tears welled up in her eyes. She broke down sobbing and ran out of the room. I didn't regret what I had said. I knew I had been blunt, maybe even harsh, but I needed to put an end to Alexa's illusions immediately. I didn't want any more misunderstandings. Right after that, I told my wife everything. I expected her to be shocked or angry at how I had treated her sister. But to my surprise, she was calmer than I had expected. She said I was right to reject Alexa, but that I might have been too harsh. She didn't blame me. In fact, she even thanked me for being honest. I could see the exhaustion in her eyes. Maybe, deep down, she also knew that Alexa needed a wake-up call, that her sister couldn't continue living in her fantasy. But the problem didn't end there. My in-laws immediately called, furious, demanding an explanation. Alexa must have said something to them, or maybe they were just angry that their daughter was hurt. I wasn't surprised. They had always spoiled Alexa too much, and this was the result. On top of that, I started receiving strange messages from people I assumed were Alexa's friends. Some were threats, others were accusations. I didn't understand why Alexa was blowing things out of proportion, but I didn't care. To me, the only thing that mattered now wasn't Alexa. It was my wife, the only woman I truly cared about. I didn't regret telling the truth. But I couldn't help wondering, was there a better way to end this without making everything so tense? I never really liked Alexa, and if you knew her, you'd probably feel the same way. After years of watching her grow up, I realized that Alexa was a spoiled, arrogant, and difficult girl. She never appreciated the sacrifices my wife made, the woman who took care of her like a mother. Instead of being grateful, Alexa always acted as if the whole world owed her something. My wife is the most patient person I have ever known. She spent her youth caring for Alexa, trying to help her with her studies, ensuring she had a stable life, and even enduring her unreasonable tantrums. But in return, Alexa only rebelled and caused trouble. She had no respect for anyone, was rude to my wife, constantly argued, and did everything her way. Throughout the years we lived together, I witnessed Alexa doing countless things that made my wife miserable. She repeatedly broke family rules, ignored advice, and acted as if she didn't care about anything. When it came to school, she never put in any effort, always avoided homework, and failed most of her classes. Her teachers had long since grown used to her irresponsibility, and most of them didn't have a good impression of her. My wife tried countless times to help her, but all she received in return was indifference. I tolerated Alexa for my wife's sake. I knew my wife loved her like a daughter, and I didn't want to hurt her by speaking harshly about her sister. But over time, I grew exhausted. I saw my wife cry over Alexa more times than I could count, devastated that she never even tried to change. What I couldn't understand was that, despite how kind my wife was to her, Alexa still acted resentful and defiant, as if she was deliberately making my wife's life miserable. There were times when I saw my wife completely drained because of Alexa. She spent entire evenings helping her study, only to find out that her sister hadn't even bothered to open a book. She pleaded with teachers to give Alexa another chance to fix her grades, but Alexa didn't care at all. I told my wife that maybe it was time to let go, to let Alexa take responsibility for her own life. But my wife always felt it was her duty, that if she gave up, her sister would have no one left to care for her. And then, when Alexa went to college, I thought my wife might finally have some peace. No more worrying every day about whether Alexa was studying. No more pointless arguments, No more carrying a burden that was never supposed to be hers. I hoped that distance would help Alexa mature, or at the very least, allow my wife to focus on her own life. But then Alexa came back for Thanksgiving, and instead of being more mature, she made everything worse. She confessed that she had feelings for me. She said that I had always been kinder to her than my wife, that I was the only person who truly cared about her. But the truth is, I never actually cared about Alexa the way she thought I did. I was only kind to her because I loved my wife, and if helping Alexa made things easier for my wife, I would do it. But that didn't mean I liked Alexa, and it certainly didn't mean I wanted her to misinterpret our relationship. At that moment, I realized Alexa wasn't just a spoiled child. She didn't even understand the boundaries between right and wrong. And maybe this was the result of being coddled for too long, never having to take responsibility for her actions. But that didn't mean I had to suffer the consequences. I thought that after clarifying everything with Alexa, the issue would be resolved. But I was wrong. She may have left the room in tears, but the consequences of that confrontation did not disappear so easily. It became a real storm, pulling me, my wife, and her family into a vortex of tension. As soon as Alexa ran out of the room, I told my wife everything. I still remember the look in her eyes as she listened to me recount every word I had said. She was neither angry nor reproachful. Instead, she simply sighed and said that I was right to reject Alexa, but perhaps I had been too blunt. I didn't know if she was sad, but I could sense a deep exhaustion in her voice. She wasn't surprised, almost as if she had known this would happen sooner or later. However, no matter how understanding my wife was, that didn't mean the rest of her family felt the same way. The very next day, I received a call from my in-laws. They didn't ask me what had happened. They didn't care about the truth. They only knew that their daughter, Alexa, had called them in tears, saying that I had treated her cruelly. My in-laws were furious. They blamed me for hurting Alexa, for being too harsh with her. They never mentioned what Alexa had said to me, nor did they ask whether her confession had been appropriate. In their eyes, I was the one at fault. I had hurt their little girl, and that was unacceptable. I tried to explain, but it was useless. They didn't want to listen. To them, Alexa was still a fragile girl who needed to be protected. And it was precisely this indulgence that had shaped her into the person she was today. Selfish, arrogant, and never willing to take responsibility for her actions. It didn't stop there. Soon, I started receiving strange messages from unknown numbers. Some were accusatory, while others were outright threatening. It didn't take me long to figure out where they were coming from. Alexa had undoubtedly told her friends the story in a way that made her look like the victim. In her version, I was probably a cold, heartless villain who had deliberately hurt her. She had likely omitted the part where she confessed her feelings to me, or how she had misunderstood everything from the very beginning. These things annoyed me, but what worried me the most was my wife. I knew she was caught in a difficult position. On one side, there was me, the husband she loved, who had simply voiced what she might have already felt deep inside. On the other side, there was Alexa, the younger sister she had raised, the one she still considered family despite her stubbornness. And now she was forced to choose between the two. Though my wife never said it, I knew she was under pressure from her family. I noticed her growing more fatigued, more pensive. Every time her parents called, she tried to reassure them, but I knew things weren't that simple. Her family wanted her to side with Alexa. I didn't want to put my wife in a difficult position, but I also couldn't take back what I had said. I was exhausted with Alexa, with her selfishness, with the way she constantly caused my wife distress. I didn't regret my words, but I also understood that I had pushed things to the breaking point. The biggest question now was, could my marriage survive this fracture? Alexa might no longer be the biggest problem. It was the pressure from my wife's family. I knew my wife loved me, but I also knew she loved her family. And if she were forced to choose, I wasn't sure what the outcome would be. The storm has not passed yet. Despite my efforts to explain, my in-laws still see me as the one at fault. The strange messages from Alexa's friends keep coming. But what troubles me the most is not the accusations, it's my wife's attitude. She is caught between two opposing forces, her family on one side and me on the other. And even though she has never blamed me for what happened, I can feel the weight she is carrying. In the days that followed, the atmosphere at home changed. My wife remained gentle with me, treating me as usual, but I could see that she was deep in thought. She didn't smile as much as before, nor did she chat with me about small daily things like she used to. Every time her phone rang, I knew it was her parents, and I knew they were relentlessly pressuring her. I tried my best not to drag my wife into this conflict, but it was impossible. Alexa had turned this into a family matter, and even though I didn't want it, my wife was inevitably pulled in. I saw her trying to please both sides, but it only exhausted her more. I wanted to tell her that she didn't have to endure this, that she could set boundaries with Alexa and her parents. But I knew, saying it was easier than doing it. I wondered, was I wrong for telling the truth? I don't regret what I said to Alexa. I know she needed to hear those things to break free from her delusions. I also don't think I was wrong for not reciprocating her feelings. Doing so would be unethical and completely unacceptable. But I do wonder if there was a better way to handle everything without turning my wife's family against me. Maybe I was too harsh. Maybe I should have been more restrained when speaking to Alexa. But no matter how gently I put it, the truth remains the same. I never had feelings for her. I never saw her as anything more than my wife's younger sister, and I was only kind to her because I love my wife. Now that everything has happened, Alexa and my in-laws' anger are no longer my biggest concerns. What worries me is my wife. I'm afraid she feels trapped between me and her family. I fear that even though she loves me, the pressure from her family will eventually drive her away from me. I don't know what the future holds for our marriage. I don't know if time will help my wife overcome this pressure. I don't know if her family will ever accept me after all of this. But there is one thing I do know for sure. I cannot change what has already happened, and I cannot change the fact that I am exhausted from Alexa and all the trouble she has caused. In the end, all I can do is wait to see if my wife will continue to stand by my side.